Hello, my name is Pat, also known as Tsukiyomi, and this is a primer for EDH, also known as Elder Dragon Highlander, or VLH, Village Leader Highlander. My goal with this video is to teach you some of the basic rules of the game, as well as a deck construction guidelines, so that hopefully you and your friends can try out this fun format. Okay, so the first thing you're probably asking is, what is EDH? EDH is an alternate format that was originally made for Magic the Gathering that is very popular. And some players have actually adapted that rule set to the Naruto CCG, and that will be the focus of this video. Now before we begin, I assume you guys already know how to play the Naruto CCG game. So if you don't, you should probably head over to Bandai's website, which I will post in the sidebar. So that leads us now to the topic of why play EDH. Well, it boils down to a couple of things. First off, it's a much slower format. Games are more strategic and they usually take longer. And missing one or two of your ninja drops does not automatically cause you to lose the game, like in standard Naruto. Second, it is a multiplayer format. There are actual rules that I will touch on later to play with 3 or more players. So it can be a lot of fun as long as you guys all settle down and don't team up on one another. Next, there's a wider selection of cards that don't normally see play that can actually thrive in this format. And just as an example for the cards, like you'll actually see cards like 4th Gamabunta are actually very playable in this format. And that's not all. There are cards like one of these, 9-tailed Fox Spirit, and sit in your binder, you can actually use it. How about Approaching Showdown? Considering there's so many high drops, it's actually worth it here. Successive Hokages, yep, that works too. Manda, Rashomon, the list just goes on, like as you can see. It's a whole smatter of cards here. And our last point that I want to bring up is it's challenging. Building a deck with 3 of any card is easy, but when you're limited to only 1 of a card, it's much more difficult. As you can see, I don't know if you can see here, none of these cards are the same. They are all one-ofs. You're only allowed 1 copy of a card in the deck. You will not see any repeats. Alright, so let's move on to the next topic. Okay, so now we're going to talk about some of the basic rules of EDH. First off, you need an 80 card deck minimum. As you can see, this is an example 80 card deck. It is much larger than your standard Naruto deck. You can have more cards in it if you want, just know that 80 is the minimum. There is no maximum. You can only run 1 copy of a card. So if you want to play Sasuke Uchiha Cold-Headed, that is the only copy of the card that you can play. However, you can run 3 different cards of the same name. So if you want to play Sasuke Uchiha Severing Bond and Sasuke Uchiha Finishing Blow in addition to your Cold-Headed, you can do that. There is no ninja limit in EDH. Standard Naruto has 30, this game has infinite. You could play a deck of all ninjas if you really wanted to. For the minimum 80 card deck, I highly recommend about 50. It seems to be a good ratio and it works. You can only play the elements of your general. Or the general is a card we will talk about in the next section, so for right now you can kind of just dismiss it. The player who goes first does draw. This is important. In standard Naruto, I know you don't, but in this game, you do. Turns go in a clockwise order from whoever starts. This is a rule, obviously, for 3 or more players. And also, it's very important to know, you get 1 free mulligan. So if you were to get a janky hand, like, say, Orochimaru, Second Hokage, Aoi, Arashi Fuma, Toyuya, and Sexy Jutsu, you could mulligan that if you want, and you wouldn't go to 5 like you do in standard Naruto. You would again go to 6. So we can mull up to this hand of 6 right here, and there you go. That's a much better hand. I would definitely keep that. However, it's important to note that you can still do the standard mulligan in Naruto. So if you wanted to go to 5 after that, you really could, and then 4. And then even 3. This game actually allows you to mulligan to 1 if you really want to. I don't recommend it, but it is there for those players who want that option. So now we're on to the topic of generals. your general needs to be a platoon. For the purpose of this video, we're going to use the 4th Hokage and Gamma Bunta. It cannot be a squad, so you can't play a card like, say, Sakura Tsunade as your general. You can still use the reinforcement deck, this just can't be your general. You need to use a platoon. The general stays face up in its own remove from play pile, separate from other remove from play cards. It must be face up, not face down. You do this as a common courtesy to your opponent. That's mostly due in part to the fact that you can only play cards that have the symbols on the general. So for this particular platoon, I can only play the lightning cards and water cards. I can't play anything else. So if you have it face down, your opponent doesn't know what you're playing, and they could accuse you of cheating and all kinds of other stuff. So just don't do it. It's kind of like a gentleman's agreement. On the subject of dual symbols, like let's say you wanted to play a card like Leaf Hospital. I know it has the wind symbol, but because it has the water symbol and it matches at least one of the symbols on 4th Hokage Bunta, you can play this card. So hopefully that helps. Now when it comes time to play your general, if you meet the entrance cost requirement on the card, so for example, we have in turn 8 here, if it's turn 8 or later, I can play this card from my hand. It does count as a deploy. That's mostly just to avoid put and play shenanigans that can occur with certain platoons. It's a balancing issue. So this does count as a deploy when you put it into play. You do not need to have either of these two ninjas in play to play this card. However, if you had one of them in play, say 4th Hokage younger days, you can still play your general. It counts as an actual platoon at this point. You would move, standard platoon rules, you move 4th Hokage younger days to Chakra as it comes into play. This still does count as a deploy though. I know I said standard platoon rules apply, but it still does count as a deploy, mostly again for balancing issues. Also, it's important to note that when your general leaves play, the hand cost that you have to pay when putting it into play increases by 1. So when we put this into play originally, it has 1 hand cost. If it were to leave play, it's 2 hand cost. I believe it's to a maximum of 7. So you would have to discard your whole hand to play the card. This is again for balancing issues, so that way you can't suicide a 0 hand cost general and constantly keep playing it. Also, as a side note, I think it's kind of important to note, like, you don't really want to be playing the same ninjas that are on the platoon. If you already had specific jutsus, you already have this guy available to you at any time, it's like he's already in your hand. So that's just something to take away.